Hi everyone, welcome to Mike's Geek Corner with your host, Mike Quevedo. And here we are with this second part of the Pulp Culture Spotlight featuring Robert E. Howard's Kull. Now, if you haven't seen the first part of this video, you can go ahead and watch it on the link below the description. And so, when we left off in the previous video, we saw how Kull becomes the king of Valusia after vanquishing the tyrannical King Borna. So from here on, most of Kull's adventures deal with him defending his throne from interlopers from the outside and from within his kingdom. The stories that I'll cover will be the ones of longer length, and I'm not going to spoil the climax of the stories for you. And then afterwards, I will give my thoughts on the stories and the character of Kull and the property's potential in today's entertainment venue. So, and without further ado, let's do the first story, the Shadow Kingdom. Kull is invited to a feast by the ambassador of the Pictish Isles, Canute, who, in spite of the fact that Atlanteans and Picts are ancient enemies, confides in Kull a crucial secret in return to place trust on the Picts' war chief, Brull, the Spear Slayer. That night, Brull meets with Kull inside the kingdom of Valusia, and he reveals to Kull a secret passage in his chambers that leads them both below, where they find a number of the king's Red Slayers dead. Then, both see what appears to be Kull's chief counselor, too, passing through the corridor, holding a dagger heading towards the king's chambers, unaware of their hiding presence. Brull suggests taking another shorter route back to Kull's quarters, and tells Kull he should lay in bed, thinking sleep and await the coming of Tu. As Tu enters the king's chambers and readies to kill the seemingly sleeping Kull, the latter, at the word from Brull, hurls himself at the assassin with sword in hand, slaying Tu. Suddenly, the physical features of Tu begin to fade to reveal the head of a serpent. After explaining that the real Tu is in his own chambers, still sleeping, Brull then tells Kull that the Serpent Men, an ancient humanoid race with skin and heads of snakes, are using their magical powers to disguise themselves and replace Kull as king with one of their own and rule Valusia as they did centuries ago. Using a specific word that only man can pronounce, Kull and Brull set out to discover the rest of the disguised Serpent Men and cleanse the Valusian kingdom. Next story, Delcarte's Cat, or also known as the Cat and Skull. Putting aside a threat from the necromancer Thulsa Doom, Kull is introduced to Saramis, who is a cat that is 1,000 years old, in the care of noblewoman Delcarte. The cat shows that it has the ability to talk and be all-knowing. The voice from Saramis also warns Kull of Thulsa Doom's threat, which Kull still responds to with certain disdain. One day, Saramis tells Kull that his friend Brull has been taken by a monster beneath the surface of the Forbidden Lake. As the king is calling for guards to go searching, the cat's voice suggests that Kull should travel alone, as it is custom that, with the exception of the king, death falls to any man who enters beneath the lake. Once Kull arrives at the lake and dives in searching for the Spear Slayer, he subsequently defeats 3 monstrous creatures beneath the waters, before another snake-like creature efficiently renders him helpless, until he is delivered in the domain under the bottom of the Forbidden Lake. As Kull examines his surroundings within the island kingdom, from the shadows a great number of luminous-looking beings with luminous eyes approach him. Their king at first takes Kull for a reaver and intends on his doom, but Kull convinces them of his actual intentions. However, the Lake King negates any knowledge of Brull being anywhere in the lake, and though he is aware of the ancient cat, he is unaware of its ability to speak. Kull is provided with a voyage back to the surface, with the intent of sorting out this deceit with Saramis or whatever twisted force is behind it. Next story, By This Axe I Rule. A plot to remove Kull from the Valusian throne through means of assassination by a group of nobles and outlaws is taking place after having implemented dissent among the inhabitants of Valusia. The plan, structured by notorious cutthroat Argion, consists of buying one of the king's Red Guard to have his men removed from their posts outside the king's quarters so to allow the assassination to take place. In the meantime, after Kull broods with regret over the population's discontent over his rule, and also the Valusian loss which stall him from governing the way he would like, he bids farewell to Brule, as he is tasked with accompanying Canu with a great number of guards to the kingdom of Grandar on diplomatic affairs. That night, the conspirators sneak inside the palace and finally into the king's quarters to find, to their surprise, Kull awake and ready for battle holding an axe. Kull manages to kill a significant number of his thwarters, but his severe wounds will only allow him so much chance without aid of his soldiers soon. Next story, Swords to the Purple Kingdom. Kull is informed by his friend and ally, Count Muran Voravalin, that word has it that an attempt to remove him from the Volusian throne is being considered by Berulian masterminds to implement a coup in the Topaz throne. That night, Kull is unexpectedly visited by a harmless-looking small elder man hanging by the vines outside his window. The wizened man hands Kull a letter, sealed with a royal signet ring that only Chief Counselor 2 possesses. The parchment states that Kull should follow the small elder man where he'll lead him for the sake of his own life and his kingdom. Kull so does follow to what eventually leads him to an ambush orchestrated by Belurians and a mysterious figure called the Masked One in the ruins of the Accursed Gardens, and Kull becomes a helpless prisoner. Around this time, a badly wounded Tu is found by the Farsunian young warrior Dalgar. After Dalgar takes the injured counselor to Brule and tend his wound, Tu explains that someone had struck him by surprise and taken his signet ring. Brule and guards begin to investigate the matter further. In the meantime, Count Velin's daughter, Nalisa, who after failing to persuade her father and Kull to allow her to marry Dalgar due to his Farsunian background, makes an arrangement to meet Dalgar at the Accursed Gardens so they can flee from Valusia and live together, and as she arrives at the ruins to wait for her lover, Valyrian rogues capture her and lock her up in the same dungeon as Kull. After she does her best to cut the ropes binding Kull with a piece of marble, the Atlantean snaps his bonds before terminating the life of the sizable Valyrian who had opened the cell to take him away. With the door now open, Kull, armed with the dead Valyrian sword, and Nalisa make their exit from the dungeon. But they must now try and survive the strongly numbered Valyrian soldiers as they both try and fend off their enemies as they stand from a cul-de-sac stairway. The last story, The Mirrors of Tusun Thun. We find Kull in his throne, feeling weary of the tranquility that lays upon Valusia and its borders. After neglecting an invite from Brule to roam the waters with him due to the lack of enthusiasm, a girl of the court approaches him to tell him of the ancient wizard Tusun Thun and his House of the Thousand Mirrors, stating that the wizard holds the secrets of life and death and can speak with the dead and demons from beyond. She advises the king to go see him to help him with his dilemma at hand. Kull is convinced and heads to the Lake of Visions, where the House of Tusun Thun stands. The wizard greets him and offers the king a seat in a throne-like chair to gaze into his mirrors. In one of the mirrors he sees an image of himself that makes him feel petty. In another mirror he sees images of the past when primitive beasts and beast-like men roamed the lands. Then looked into another that showed him the future in which foretold the crumbling of the 7 empires and become forgotten. Kull then looks into another mirror in which he sees what seems like a reflection of himself that has its own individuality, and other visions of strange lands, all of which make him think if his own reality is real or just a dream. The king would leave the House of Mirrors and return to it each following day, with such an urge that he forsakes the affairs of his kingdom, leaving the people to murmur and his soldiers to quarrel among themselves. As Kull is staring at his otherworldly reflection once more, suddenly the mirror shatters, and a familiar voice calls his name. And so there you have him. So, these stories I think are so vividly well written. Robert E. Howard is a master of establishing these dreamlike worlds. This very eerie atmosphere, but much like his contemporary H.P. Lovecraft. And with Kull, just as he also did with Conan, he tackles the theme of barbarism versus civilization. And in this instance, with Kull, you have this, this outsider, right? This pagan, barbarian warrior, now being the king, being surrounded by noblemen, right? The elite, I guess, elite-minded people who, don't see him fit because of his background, to be around them, and it makes you think, right? Who's really the more the more barbaric, really, of them, of these two. This guy who Kull, who yes comes from a world of violence. Yes, he's led a violent life, having to to survive. But he's very noble, but he's very noble intentioned, and a huge sense of honor. Whereas these guys, they are, they're snakes, metaphorically speaking, in elegant wardrobe. They're very vicious, despite what their facade may imply. And so I think that's a very interesting, contrast. Then, if you happen to like also, the stories by Edgar Rice Burroughs of Tarzan and, Rudyard Kipling's Jungle Book stories, Mowgli, and also the old Beowulf poems, and the Kull adventures are should be very fitting for you. It's high adventure as it gets. Sword and sorcery that only the type of sword and sorcery that only Robert E. Howard, was could master like no one else. Now, as for as a intellectual property, I think Kull, I think contains some huge potential to be adapted. I think either if not a theatrical film, then certainly a streaming series or cable series, like Game of Thrones. It has that. It has the materials to, it has the politics and the fantastical elements, the fantasy elements, the sword and sorcery elements, like Game of Thrones, with the the barbarism, the raw material, the greediness of shows like Vikings or Spartacus. And it'd be a great opportunity to present to the mainstream audiences this world, the style of writing that Robert E. Howard gave us so many decades ago. Introduce them to mainstream audiences who, even those who still may not have seen even the Arnold Conan movies, or let's not even get into. Well, I think the Jason Momoa Conan movie, I think it was very flawed, but even though Jason Momoa did a very good Conan, but anyway, that's beside the point. I think it's about time, because a lot of the work that it's been adapted from Robert E. Howard's writings, literature, has only done some lip service, but they've not been fully faithful to his style of writing. And I think it's about time. And I think, I understand that Conan supposedly was pitched as a streaming series to Amazon, by the writer of The Handmaid's Tale. But it seems they didn't go with it, and so that's a shame, because the concept that how this Conan series was pitched was, it seemed it was going to follow just like the storyline, the stories from Robert E. Howard chronically, and so it's heartbroken that they didn't go with it. But if not Conan, then they should definitely look into Kull, because it offers somewhat the same thing, but at the same time it's its own thing. I think that the very substantial difference between Kull and Conan is, with Conan you're dealing with a king. His adventures, his essential element is that he's a king. You're dealing with a king's adventures, as opposed to Conan, who's loner. Yes, there are stories of him as king, but that have been written. But mostly it's him as a pirate or as a thief. That's the predominant, quality. Known feature of Conan. Whereas with Kull, it is that he's a king, and he must defend his throne against conspirators. And so I think if at some point the people who have the Robert Howard's the rights to Howard's work, they could do worse than to pitch this very amazing character. And I think it would hit with the average Joe, I think, perfectly. So there it is. That's Kull for you. Hope you found this character intriguing. You will go out and read those stories, be it in the... You can find many of the old editions on Amazon or eBay. And I believe on Barnes & Noble there's the newer editions of Robert E. Howard's work, and I think that the Kull stories should be available, or they can order them for you if they don't have them. They're at the store. So, and the comic books also from Marvel and Dark Horse. You want to check them out. They adapt the stories as well in those. They take some liberties, yes, and they do pastiches, but they're still very, for the most part, all of them, the majority well written. And obviously the illustrations, the artists like John Buscema, Mary Severin, Mike Ploop, Bernie Wrightson, so many artists who rendered the Kull amazingly. Their story really captured the Howard world, you know, real Buffalo stuff. And so there it is. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a like, make sure you subscribe, and I'll be seeing you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.